I would listen to uplifting music when I was processing because it kind of was a weight. And that's one thing that I would recommend to people if you are dealing with collections like that, is to kind of have some strategies to, touch base with yourself.
From the Society of American Archivists student chapter at the University of Alabama, this is Archives and Communities, a podcast highlighting community archiving initiatives and the people behind them.
I'm Sandy Yang, a student in the Archival Studies Social Justice Master's Scholarship Program at the University of Alabama's School of Library and Information Studies. Today, I'm excited to be speaking with Laura Daly, a recent graduate from the University of Alabama's School of Library and Information Studies. As the former president of the Society of American Archivists, University of Alabama chapter, Laura co-produced the second season of this very podcast. She advocates for representing diverse communities through her research and volunteer work. Since graduating, Laura completed an internship at Duke University as a human rights archive intern. There, she processed a significant collection advocating against the death penalty. In our conversation today, we'll discuss her podcast experiences, the importance of mentorship, and her hopes for advancing the archiving field. Welcome to the show, Laura.
I'm so excited to be here. I was actually really excited when you reached out to me, Sandy, because just you mentioning kind of restarting the podcast, and I had so much fun doing it when I was the president. And so I was just beyond excited that you guys are continuing this. So it is a little more stressful being on this end of the conversation and not doing the interview. So it's a little bit of a different experience now being on this side. But I just want to emphasize, I'm still kind of finding my way in this field. I'm definitely a novice. I'm in the kind of post-graduation job hunt right now, and I kind of feel more of like a peer than a mentor to you guys. So hopefully we'll have an interesting conversation. But yeah, I'm super excited for this new season you guys are doing, and I'm already impressed by you and your thoughtfulness and your just passion for archival discourse. So I'm excited to see how this goes.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I just thought it would be such a great opportunity to connect with you through this podcast, because I think a lot goes into making a podcast, and I definitely want to continue the spirit of community archive. So I wanted to stay true to that, and I think listeners would love to hear about your journey into the field. Just hearing the different stories can demonstrate the variety of options that are available in this profession.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reflecting on your internship at Duke University's Human Rights Archive, how has this experience enriched your understanding and practice in the field of archiving?
I guess just to kind of back up a little bit to kind of tell how I had this opportunity, we had moved to North Carolina during my last year at UA, and I thought, what the heck? I'll apply for an internship at Duke since we're going to be there. And if you've ever seen the campus, it's just stunning. The library, it looks like a castle. It's so beautiful. I felt very lucky. It was sort of like the stars aligned that I was able to get that internship as the human rights archivist. So it was just a great experience. Then I walked in on my first day, and I saw the rows and rows of shipping boxes, which were part of the collection that I would be in charge of processing. It was like 112 boxes in total. And I just thought to myself, oh no, I've made a large mistake. It was paralyzing almost to see, just the sides of it. But I was really lucky to work with just the most amazing staff at Duke. My supervisor, Patrick Stosky, he's the human rights archivist at Duke, and he is just a wonderful human being. He's incredibly supportive, knowledgeable. He's an advocate for human rights in every sense of the word. And then my kind of immediate supervisor in the processing field, Paula Genet, she's the processing archivist there. And I kind of consider her the mother of my archival journey. She really just taught me all the hands-on things about processing a collection. And she just so inspiring and incredibly focused and passionate person. So I was really blessed to have both of them kind of on my side, helping me through the process. They gave me, honestly, a surprising amount of autonomy and trust with this collection. at first, they definitely were helping me a lot to kind of navigate how to get started. But then as things moved on, they really kind of let me decide, kind of make some of the big decisions about organization and description. So at the same time, they gave a lot of valuable training and mentorship to me throughout the process. So yeah, it was great. So I processed the materials from the Carolina Justice Policy Center. Just to tell you a little bit about the collection, it's a criminal justice organization that existed from 1975 to 2019. It was a very small staff who achieved an incredible amount of work. They worked on sentencing for juveniles and people with mental disabilities, substance abuse rehabilitation, racial injustice, moratorium on the death penalty, just to name a few of the things that they worked on. They were also heavily involved in reform at every level. So they did legislative, policy work, committee work. They did a lot of pretty intimate work with the actual incarcerated people, writing letters to people who were on death row, developing relationships with them to advocate for them. And so just like an incredible, incredible organization. I really gained so much appreciation for their tireless efforts and just for, people that are in this field of criminal justice reform. It's really amazing and inspiring. That's a little bit about the collection, but, to your question, you said, kind of what was my takeaways from this experience. So I would definitely say, each collection is unique and has its own surprises that you just kind of have to be prepared for. So of all the things that you would find in like boxes of papers, I discovered 2 square pieces of fabric with beautiful artwork painted on them, some like horses and mountains and flowers. And I was just like shocked to find these. And what it was a gift to the director of CJPC, who was a woman, and it was from an incarcerated person on death row. And I feel like this was such an extremely important artifact, not just because of its uniqueness, but I really felt that it encapsulated the heart of the collection, just the gratitude that the incarcerated felt for the advocacy of CJPC on their behalf. And, the fact that they were working to achieve every legal affordance for them and resource that they were entitled to, regardless of how, society kind of labels them as, less than human and not worthy of those types of resources. So that was just like a really exciting moment for me. I later learned from a formerly incarcerated person that these are actually napkins that you can buy in prison, because I was like, what is this? And it's actually a napkin. You just like can buy them in the, I don't know, like store there. But so another takeaway I would say is the importance of planning and then being able to adjust your plans. So there were many times I was so stressed because I thought I wouldn't be able to get it done. But I just learned that if you stay focused each day and set maybe small goals to help you reach the bigger goals, that worked really well for me. Paying attention to all the clues. So there were inscriptions that were scribbled on all the boxes in Sharpie. And at first it didn't seem super important, but it actually became critical to maintain the integrity of the collection because the organization was really kind of hard to understand. So, those little clues was like, oh man, this is exactly what we need to know, kind of how they organized it and how they use these records. So yeah, the ethical juggling act of representing the incarcerated while still protecting their privacy and rights, that was a challenge. So like the language that we used in the finding aid, we had to be pretty careful about. We would sit in meetings and talk about Library of Congress subject headings that we should use. But ultimately, we kind of had to come up with our own plan. Like instead of saying like prisoner, we weren't super comfortable with that, in that it's such a, just like a negative label. We wanted to say incarcerated person. They used the term mental retardation throughout the whole collection. I mean, this is like the 70s and 80s. So we changed that to mental disabilities. So just things like that, where we wanted to be really careful with the language we were using. And then, of course, like restricting anything that could be incriminating, like in their personal correspondence with incarcerated people, we had to be careful to restrict that. So those were just some of the kind of juggling these kinds of things and being careful. And then, of course, the last takeaway I wanted to mention is, really learning to highlight marginalized voices in a collection like this, particularly that of the incarcerated. So we really utilized description to provide greater emphasis on and access to these voices of the incarcerated through their letters mostly. So we really were able to kind of bring that out. it wasn't necessarily a huge part of the collection, but we wanted to make sure that that was very seen and that people could access those records and be able to learn from that and have their voice be heard. So yeah, and technology, is amazing now. It's amazing what you can do to arrange things and just make it super accessible. So it was really cool to work with the Duke staff to be able to learn some of these technologies and archive space and all the things that they use to make it all happen.
That's quite a lot of takeaways.
Did you have certain things in mind of what you needed for your internship experience to teach you? Like, is there any sort of tips or anything that you would like to offer about setting yourself up for a good internship experience?
That's a good question. My experience in this chapter, in the SAA UA chapter, was really helpful to kind of set me apart. It wasn't, I don't know how competitive it was, but I know that there were other Duke students that were applying for the position. So I think just my enthusiasm for, representing like diverse communities, and really trying to put those voices first in collections was really kind of exciting for them. And that, I had kind of considered these issues already. And yeah, just like my enthusiasm for the field, yeah, I think that really goes a long way for people who are looking for good, interns, people who are excited, who want to work hard, and who, are really thoughtful about these issues that are really important.
Was there anything that was extra helpful in getting you through the process to juggle all these responsibilities of being sensitive to the needs of everybody in the collection, that the voices in the collection, but also getting it done in time? The 100 and I think it was 12 or 19 boxes you mentioned.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's a good question. That really was a skill I had to develop because it was really easy to get lost in the collection sometimes. You start to see recurring names and you want to learn a little more about their story, like what happened to them, what was their case like. And, obviously it is important to be an expert on your collection, but you do have to kind of develop that skill of, doing a quick, scan through, what is the nature of this document? Where does it need to go? How did they use it? And how does it fit into our organization scheme? And you just start to do it like really quickly. And so that was something I had to learn. Another thing was just the nature of the collection was, obviously it kind of centered on experiences of like human trauma, violence, honestly, just like a really kind of heaviness to the collection, like a feeling. I would listen to like, uplifting music when I was processing because it kind of was a weight. And that's one thing that I would recommend to people if you are dealing with collections like that is to kind of have some strategies to, touch base with yourself, like emotionally and mentally, to make sure you're in an okay place, because it can be weighty to deal with those kind of matters of incarceration and violence. But I think, if you have trusted people that you can, collaborate with and kind of maybe talk to them a little bit about what you're seeing and what you're coming across, I think that can help a lot than to just kind of try to just, dive in too headstrong and taking it all on your shoulders. So that was just another thing that was a challenge.
What are you most proud of with what you've accomplished in this internship?
I just feel so happy that I feel like we created a good organization scheme so that it is very accessible, so that it's not hard for people to immediately see like the breadth of the work that was accomplished and the nature of it, and that someone can access the collection and say, hey, I'm really interested in, substance abuse rehabilitation, and, find that and be able to see like what great work they did there. And so just to kind of be like the conduit for that, I don't feel like I did anything that incredible, but just being able to highlight, the amazing work that they did was just like a really amazing experience. And I just developed so much respect for the founder of the organization, basically. She just was really amazing. So it was cool to be a part of that.
How do you believe digital tools and methodologies are reshaping the landscape of community archiving and human rights preservation?
Honestly, the answer to this question, I feel like was really my first like aha moment as a student. So we did a reading in one of my first archives classes. It's called Local Archives and Community Collecting in the Digital Age. And it was written by some individuals from the University of Melbourne. And they talked about archiving with Indigenous communities in Australia. And they were able to develop a software that would enable the indigenous communities to preserve their records. And it just blew me away. Because, it wasn't even just about, preserving their records, but also how these records were being used by the community to empower them, making land claims. Financially, they were able to, utilize some of their records for educational materials and actually, financially benefit from that. And just like this variety of ways they were using this archive. And I just got really excited about it. I thought, this is so cool. It's just amazing. There's probably numerous examples out there of how technology is being used to represent communities in a variety of ways. And it's just really amazing.
Is this the same technology that you guys covered in a previous podcast, I believe? It's not the Mercudu, is it?
Yes. So it was I think precursor. Yeah, I think it was the precursor to it. And then University of Washington kind of started to spearhead Mukurtu CMS. And they started to work with the indigenous peoples there in kind of Northwest United States. Yeah, they've done some really amazing stuff. I mean, shout out to this episode on season 2. I think it was an interview with Trevor Bond and Lotus Norton Wisla. But their platform is really interesting because they really put the control in the hands of the community to determine how they want things structured. Levels of accessibility for like different, items, and how they want things described. And so it's a really, I think, powerful relationship between an institution and a community, because they're giving them the tools that they need to be able to preserve the collection the way that they want to. I think that's a shining example personally of how institutions and communities can work together, but also what kind of technology is out there.
And it sounds like the value of this information is like current, so that the community can use it for land rights, you said, and for sharing their own history with the community members now. Like that current access is something I don't think traditional archives practices prioritize, sort of making the materials accessible now versus like, there might be a 10 or 25 year wait period.
Right.
for access.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think in my classes, there has been a greater emphasis of like the digital humanities and its usefulness. I'm wondering if as a field, that will become like a requirement later on. I mean, are you seeing that more and more while you're job hunting, digital skills being a requirement in the work you're doing?
I think so. I think it's always a benefit because, that option is there to make collections more accessible that way. I couldn't say that it's an absolute requirement that you're familiar with digital archiving, but I do think that it's a benefit. I'm really glad that I took those classes at UA because it's really helped me in a lot of different ways. It gives you that flexibility, I think, that's really important. But, there are some collections that maybe they won't be digitized for a long time. CJPC, for example, that the amount of like time and labor that would take to digitize is like mind-boggling because it took me a year to even just process it. So, that's not to say that, you have to be able to do digital archives, but I do think it is a really important skill to at least have like a baseline knowledge of.
How has mentorship played a role in your development as an archivist, and how do you plan to mentor others in the field?
Yeah, mentorship has definitely been a critical part of my development at UA. Obviously my professors, I honestly hadn't even considered archives until Dr. Ryder gave his plug at our orientation. And I was like, wow, that's like exactly what I want to do. I had never even, thought about it before. So yeah, I think just like their wealth of knowledge and also their encouragement and their guidance. At one point, I became really set on researching Palestinian archives. And so I started to just focus all my papers on that. And Dr. Ryder's like, great, awesome, keep it up. Like, keep focusing on that, no matter how crazy it might seem or, obscure. And I really appreciated that they kind of, gave me that level of trust. Obviously, reading the work of other archivists has been huge. Even other students, I feel like, really were mentors to me because I think we all bring something different to this field. It's really amazing to see how others bring their unique interests and talents into this field and how that how that impacts it. Also, obviously interviewing archivists for the podcast, that was so just foundational for me to be able to just get to know these amazing professionals better, their passion, their story, their innovation, just said the variety of archives that are out there to represent communities is really amazing. And then also my supervisors at Duke, just incredible mentors, really teaching me kind of at that high standard of practice that they have at Duke was so invaluable to me in my career. And just honestly, their expertise in the fields and their passion for the fields has really meant a lot to me.
Yeah, I want to second that. My current experience at UA has also been very positive in allowing students the freedom and autonomy to discover their interest and how it could apply itself in archives, and to go deeper and deeper into that topic to kind of, in my case, it's been studying women in archives and trying to promote gender equity and equality in the collections itself. And Dr. Bob Ryder has just always been encouraging of that from day one. But I also felt at the same time I was allowed to pivot and dive into something else that I might be interested in. Another topic of interest was the Maui wildfires. I've been in contact with wanting to make sure that got documented as an important national event and an example of, like, there's just so many lessons to be learned from the disaster response and preparation, within a community. And then just like also the memories that were lost there, I think is also a key and critical for like the continuity of their story as well, because the fire did destroy the cultural center there. So there's I think a pressing need to
look into that. But I know this isn't about me, so we'll go back and see.
No, I'm so glad you shared that. Oh man, I'm sure that there's a lot of work to be done there. That's so sad that that center was destroyed. Yeah, Dr. Rader's definitely been an advocate for all of our all of our interests. So I think, yeah, you've got some exciting work ahead of you, I'm sure.
And just to follow up on the part where you shared that you learned about archives from I think a talk or like an introduction from Dr. Bob Ryder. What about it? Like what is archives and communities like? How does it speak to you, as a person?
Well, I come from a history background. So I studied the history of the ancient Near East. The way that he talked about archives, it really sounded kind of like a happy marriage between history and librarianship. And it was like, yes, that's it. So I just feel like it's a happy kind of combination for me because, people's stories are so important and so valuable. And I feel like that's kind of what archives are about, is telling people's stories and their history. And so, yeah, that's kind of what got me excited. And maybe, I don't know what words exactly he used, but that's what happened in my mind.
Have you found opportunities to be a mentor at this point?
Honestly, a little bit. So I kind of took on my own first project of archiving a collection of my grandparents' personal photographs and documents. I said, hey, give me all the stuff. I'll archive it. And it's been so rewarding because I have been able to kind of share with my family. I digitized a lot of it, not all of it, but just to kind of teach them a little bit about, hey, like you can go on here and listen to these, cassette tapes that I digitized, and, highlighting different parts of the collection periodically that they can check out. So that has been kind of fun. And that is an interest of mine, is educating communities on the importance of records and record keeping. That nothing too exciting or flashy, but that was my immediately, project that I've been working on lately.
Oh, that's a great way to sort of connect to people of different generations into learning about the value of archiving. When you mentioned scanning, since you didn't have necessarily institutional resources for scanning, how did you do the scanning portion or the digitizing of the recordings?
I'm slightly embarrassed that I did a lot of it with my phone. And then I found, which I think they turned out great, honestly, but then I found out that there's a genealogical organization called Family Search that is really nearby. They have a center where you can go and they have equipment for you. So you can scan all your photos, you can do a book scan, you can do all these things. They have everything there. And so I went there and and started using their stuff. It was like when I was almost done, of course. I don't know if they have, centers like that very widespread, but yeah, that was an invaluable resource.
I'm glad you got to test it out. And I think phones are pretty sophisticated these days. In another podcast, when I interviewed the digital archivist of UT Southwestern Medical Center, Angie Hauser, she mentioned just using current innovational technology that just people have, like their phones. She mentioned the iPad Air being a multifaceted tool.
So I wouldn't be embarrassed. I think that's pretty resourceful.
Thanks for the validation. Yeah, I think, even teaching people, like she probably was saying, like anyone can do this. You don't have to have professional equipment to, preserve things at a certain level.
I like that motto. Anyone can do this. Let's do it.
Okay. All right.
So I'd like to reflect on your career growth. How do you feel your early career experiences have prepared you for the challenges and opportunities in archiving field?
So my supervisor used to tell me at Duke, she said, if you can process this collection, you can process anything. And that kind of would pop up in my mind periodically when I was feeling discouraged. So I definitely feel like because of the diversity of challenges associated with that project, really helped me to feel a little more confident in being able to navigate different things, processing different collections. It was also fantastic to be a part of a top academic institution and to see, their standard of practice and how they do things. I think that helped me a lot. And also really building a support network of professionals in the field is really helpful. I've even reached out to them a couple of times with questions about, presenting and just things like that, they're just really willing to help and to give advice. And so that's really been helpful for me to kind of build that network.
I think what you're saying will be very relevant to many other archivists that are developing themselves here. Many archives are just very independent. They're small teams or even one archivist on the team. And so working in such small groups or even in isolation means reaching out to a network that you're maintaining of other professionals that can give insight to address the unique challenges that each collection has that you've mentioned before, each one being special.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's definitely critical. I mean, just having all those different perspectives and ability to influence in different ways in different areas through these different networks it just kind of plugs you in and helps you to know what resources you have at your disposal. And so, yeah, I think that does work really well.
In terms of advancing the archiving field, what impact do you hope to make in archiving, particularly in the context of your diverse interests and background?
So this is, I feel like, an easy thing to say, but much harder to do. Right now, I'm very interested in how genealogical records and research can empower communities. So particularly in the context of Middle Eastern countries, my undergraduate background, as I mentioned, is in the history of the Middle East. So many of the archives in the Middle East countries are not digitized or they're not easily accessible. So I would love to partner with genealogical organizations to digitize some of these existing records, which would make it so much easier to do genealogical research and really preserve cultural heritage, particularly for displaced communities. So those are kind of some of my visions of the future. Hopefully, we'll see if it works out.
All right. Well, we'll close with this final question. Reflecting on the evolving landscape of community archives, what would be your key piece of advice for new archivists to make a meaningful impact in this field?
I think definitely pursuing the things that you are the most passionate about. I know that sounds really just intuitive, but I really feel like that helped me a lot, is to kind of find what really drives you and to stay focused on that, join organizations that revolve around that and, read the research and do all the things to make yourself an expert in that. And I think it not only makes you a more valuable contributor in that respect, but also it makes it more enjoyable for you and you're going to just do better in it. And then the other thing, I just feel like put yourself out there. don't feel like, oh, I'm underqualified or, I don't have the experience. I know I felt that way a little bit when I was in the program because so many of the other students had already had jobs working in, libraries or archives, and I really didn't have that much. So, but I feel strongly that if you are just confident in the things that you've learned and what you hope to achieve in the field, I think that goes a long way, and people can see that when they're looking to hire. So yeah, I guess those are some of my takeaways.
I couldn't agree more. At the end of the day, you want to, I personally would like to be proud of the work that I have accomplished. And if I have an additional personal connection to the work, I think that will help us get through the day, especially when things are challenging.
Definitely.
This was an episode of Archives and Communities, the official podcast of the SAA student chapter at the University of Alabama. Music by ScanGlobe and Scott Holmes. Opinions expressed in this podcast are not reflective of any particular institution. Thank you for listening, and join us again next time.